How are you all? Hope you're fine. So today we are going to continue with the part 2 of The Storyteller by H. Munro. Kindly remove your textbook, page number 88. Now, uh, a small recap. Now, in this story, the storyteller, it is one of the best known stories written by Saki, pen name of the author H. Munro, and the story is about three children traveling with their aunt and their encounter with a stranger who tells them an unconventional story. So, in the part 1, we have seen this. Now, in the part 2, we are continuing with this. That in this part of the story, the narrator tells us how the bachelor who was traveling with the children and the aunt manages to keep the children quiet and interested for 10 minutes, which the aunt had been unable to do. So, let us see what is stored in for us in this part. She was so good, continued the bachelor, that she won several medals for goodness, which she always wore pinned on to her dress. There was a medal for. Now, see here, he is trying to tell the good qualities in the form of the story. So, there was a medal for obedience, another medal for punctuality, and a third for good behavior. They were large medals and they clicked against one another as she walked. So, as she walked, all these medals were being what? They were clicking one another. No other child in the town where she lived had as many as three medals, so everybody knew that she must be an extra good child. Horribly good, quoted Cyril. Now, horribly good, see again he's using the word horribly good. Everybody talked about her goodness, and the prince of the country got to hear about it. And he said that as she was so very good, she might be allowed once a week to walk in his park, which was just outside the town. It was a beautiful park, and no children were ever allowed in it, so it was a great honor for Bertha to be allowed to go there. So, as she was very good enough, as she was horribly good enough, so only she had a permission to go in the park and walk in the park. And the park was very, very beautiful, and it was a really a great honor. Were there any sheep in the park? Demanded Cyril. So he was asking. Now, this is an affirmative question. Now, here he's asking that were there any sheep also? Were there what? No, said the bachelor. There were no sheep, but there were other small, harmless animals in the park. And the storyteller paused. Pause means he was quiet for a few minutes or few seconds. Pause to tell a full idea of the park's treasures sink into the children's imagination, and then he resumed. Bertha was rather sorry to find that there were no flowers in the park. She had promised her aunts with the tears in her eyes that she would not pick any of the kind prince flowers, and she had meant to keep her promise, so of course it made her feel silly to find that there were no flowers to pick. Now see how strange it is, na? There was a garden, but there was not a single flower, and she had also promised to the aunt that she will not pick any flower. But in the garden, just imagine that you are walking in a park, and in the park there is no single flower to pick. Now, why weren't there any flowers? So, it is a strange question asked by them that why there's no flower? Because the animals had eaten them all, said the bachelor promptly. So the reply was quick, so promptly. And the gardeners had told the prince that you couldn't have animals and flowers, and so he decided to have animals and no flowers. And the gardener had kept the promise. He just had said that in the garden you cannot have both, na. You can have either animals or either you can have flowers, because animal usually they eat it up, na. There was a murmur of approval at the excellence of the prince's decision. Now, approval of the murmur means what? Means, see, many a times what happens that whatever you feel and somebody is agreeing upon it, right? So, at that time, there are two main decisions, whether to opt for this one or whether to opt for that one. So, here there was approval at the silence of the prince decision, and so many people would have, see, a common man would have opted for what? A common man would have opted for the flowers to grow in the garden. But the prince said, no, I want animals also in the garden. And in the garden or a park, having animals is really a strange thing, because it is not farmhouse. It is just a garden or just a park. There were lots of the other delightful things in the park, and there were ponds with the gold and blue and green fish in them. Now just imagine gold, okay, goldfish you're aware of, blue and green fish in them, and the trees with beautiful parrots that said clever things at the moment's notice, and the hummingbirds that hummed all the popular tunes of the day. Hummingbird is the kind of the bird that makes a kind of a noise, a humming noise. So whenever the voice is being heard, it is as if somebody is playing a beautiful tune. Bertha walked up and down and enjoyed herself immensely. She really enjoyed every moment of it, and thought to herself, I were not so extraordinary good. I should have not been allowed to come to this beautiful park and enjoy all that there is to be seen in it. And here, and her three medals clinked against one another as she walked, and helped to remind her how very good she really was. And whenever she used to walk, the noise was so whenever she moved ahead, as if the noise was being heard of the medals. Now see, whenever two or more things they are being they are being touched one another, what happens when it is a medal, uh, or when it is a kind of the metal, surely it is going to make some noise. So whenever these three clinged against each other, rubbed against each other, there was a noise made to remind her, like a alarm, that how very good she really was. Just then an enormous just then an enormous wolf came prowling into the park to see if it could catch a fat little animal for its supper. So then, all of a sudden, what happened? An enormous wolf came. Now, see, wolf how it is? Carnivorous, herbivorous? Yes. So, here we find that a animal, that is a wolf, came prowling into the park to see that if it could catch a fat little animal for its supper, for its dinner. The first thing that it saw in the park was a Bertha. Her pinafore was so spotlessly white and clean that it could be seen from a great distance. So the first thing sawn by that wolf was what? Was the was the Bertha. And her pinafore. That means the dress which she was wearing. It was so neat and tidy white dress. It was so clean that from the far away distance also the animal was able to notice. Birtha saw the wolf and saw that it was stealing towards her, it was coming towards her, and she began to wish that she had never been allowed to come into the park. So she started pondering in her mind, she started thinking in her mind that why had been I allowed to come in the park. She ran as hard as she could, and the wolf came after her with a huge leaps and bounds. So she began to run as much as she could. And the wolf also, with huge leaps, that means huge jumps and all, he began to move towards her. She managed to reach a shrubbery of the marital bushes, and she hid herself in one of the thickest of the bushes. And so she began to hide herself in the bushes. The wolf came sniffing among the branches, its black tongue lolling out of its mouth, and the pale grey eyes glaring with rage. The animal was very, very angry, and the eyes were red. Rage means what? With anger. Bertha was terribly frightened. Definitely, when you see a monster coming towards you, approaching towards you to eat you up, how you'll feel? You'll feel definitely, you'll feel scared only. So the similarly was the reaction of the Bertha. Bertha was terribly frightened and thought to herself, I had not been so extraordinarily good. I should have been safe in the town at this moment. So she's thinking, if I would have been not so good now, then I would have been at my at my town only, not in this park. However, the scent of the marital was so strong that the wolf could not sniff out where the Bertha was hiding. The aroma or the essence was so strong of that bush that the animal could not recognize the smell of the Bertha, because animal usually they sniff a person. And where the Bertha was hiding, and the bushes were so thick uh, that he might have hunted about in them for a long time without catching a sight of her, and so he thought that he might as well as go off and catch a little animal instead. See here, first of all, he was not able to sniff also, and then secondly, how were the bushes were very thick. So the animal was thinking that, and instead of finding her and wasting so much of time, why not to leave it and go and find out the other little small animal. Bertha was terribly trembling with very much at having the wolf prowling and sniffing. So how she was really very, very scared. Now see the bush now here, why she was safe, because the bush had a shiny leaves, and they had the sweet smelling white flowers. So the animal, he was not able to sniff. Only whenever he was trying to sniff Bertha, he was only able to smell that bush, that sweet smelling flowers. Okay, and so the and here the Bertha was, she was trembling, she was very much scaring also, so near her, and she had trembled. The medal for obedience cling against the medals for good conduct and punctuality. The wolf was just moving away when he heard the sound of the medal. As soon as the wolf heard the sound of the medal, what was the reaction? He started moving away from there, clinking, and stopped to listen, and they click again in. So, what was the reaction? As he was moving away, then again he could hear the noise, a bush quite near him. He dashed into the bush, his pale grey eyes gleaming with ferocity. Gleaming with ferocity, how means, now see, wolf is a fierce and scary animal. So when he was very, very agitated, when he was in a when you here you can call it when he was in a fit of the rage, that means he was very, very angry. And so here the fierce violence, you can call it also fierce violence, he dashed into the bush with his pale grey eyes gleaming with the ferocity and the trump, and dragged Bertha out, and devoured her to the last morsel, and then forcibly carried her. All that was left of her were her shoes, bits of clothing, and 3 medals of goodness. The story began badly, said the smaller of the small girls, but it had a beautiful ending. It is the most beautiful story that I have ever heard, said the bigger of the smaller girls with the immense decision. It is only beautiful story I have ever heard, said Cyril. A dissentient opinion came from the aunt. The aunt, she not agreed at all. She said, "What kind of nonsense this story is? A most improper story to tell to young children. You have undermined the effect of years of a careful teaching." At any rate, said the bachelor, collecting his belongings preparatory to leave the carriage, "I kept them quiet for 10 minutes, which was more than you were able to. Unhappy woman," he observed to himself as he walked down the platform of the Templecombe station. "For the next 6 months or so, those children will..." Now, see how his reaction was, that for the next 6 months or so, those children will assail her in the public with the demands for for an improper story. That means they are going to tell her again and again that please tell some kind of story. So here in this extract, though this story was really not appealable, but the thing which the stranger want to tell is that at least he had made the children quiet for some time, which the aunt was unable to do. Now now here we find that, and it is a kind of the story, really it is very strange story. There are many other kinds of the stories also. Now, few of them I'll name it. For example, fable. Now, fable is a kind of the story which is a moral bearing story with the animal characters. Then you have parable. Now, parable is having some religious base and a message or a moral. If you call about the myth, now myth is having the supernatural characters, a moral for children. Now, if you call about the legend, legend is having the historical base and characters may not be true. If you talk about the tragic tale, it is serious and ends in the tragedy. As we see na any kind of the tragedy movies and all, that way. Then you coming to fiction. Now it is very well said that truth is always stranger than fiction. So here fiction means what? Fiction is the untrue but realistic. Farce. Now, this is a kind of a story in which there is exaggerated comedy, more than required comedy. And when you talk about the satire, satire is where the vices and the folly are being ridiculed. And coming to anecdote, anecdote is a short, amusing account of an incident. So I hope that you all are very aware with the type of the stories, and also this one of the kind which is really very very strange kind of the story. So I hope this story is clear, and whatever types of the stories I have said, that is also crystal clear. And if you like my educational video, kindly like it and subscribe it. Thank you, children, and God bless you all.